It's no lie that some of my favorite characters in Naruto happen to be the oldest in the lore. In particular, my favorite character is actually Madara Uchiha, the ghost of the Uchiha. Just something about him brought that edge to the Uchiha, and his English voice, man, I won't lie, it was perfect. But besides Madara Uchiha, I also very much loved Hashirama Senju. My sister says he's my in-series avatar, and as we continue the series about characters being reborn with all of their memories, I thought, why not go back to the Hokage who started it all? I'm sure he's got a fun story to tell. So that's what we're going to do. Strap in and let's see what this new world will show us. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you're subscribed, and with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Hashirama Senju stood there for a moment before kneeling down by the soon-to-be corpse of his dearest frenemy, Madara. Even as he stood there, he thought, how many times must I be forced to watch my best friend die? How many times will I be forced to kill him? How many times? Is that you, Hashirama? Madara asked. For all the good of his Sharingan, his Rinnegan, Madara was blinded now. His power had faded away completely, and now he was simply the same as any other man in this position. He was helpless. It gave Hashirama pause for a moment as he considered how very frivolous the search for power was. How momentary, temporary. It was almost as if it were vanity. Not that strength was useless. Strength was not if it served a purpose greater than it, to which Hashirama had spent his life cultivating. But Madara's strength served only Madara, and now as he laid there dying, he found he'd been forsaken by the very thing he placed so much faith in. This was not Hashirama judging his friend as if he were better than him. No, this was pity. His friend had used only ever his strength to define himself, and now that his strength was gone, it was as if his identity had been stripped of him. He was just another body, just another dead man gazing into eternity as it awaited him. It was sad, to the point that Hashirama could not answer Madara's question right away for fear that the catch in his throat might reveal how close to crying he was. Hashirama swallowed quietly and offered a clearing of his throat so subtle that not even Madara could hear it. Yes, was all he could get out before choking off the emotion that was welling up inside of him. After so many years of fighting, so many years of war, death hadn't become any easier for him. And frankly, Hashirama was grateful for that. He didn't want this to be dulled. He didn't want it to be taken away from him. To Hashirama, to feel pain was to feel joy, and to feel at all was human. To lose your feeling was to see a very important part of your humanity torn from you.
I guess that neither you nor I were able to achieve what we wanted.
Even now, Madara was speaking of ambition. If only this ambition had been better focused. Madara's story could have been a story that echoed across all of Konoha, the same as Hashirama's. No, greater than. The pain was in knowing such ambition, even if it had been well-meaning, was lost because of his need to prove himself. Pride had mixed into his somewhat selfless desire and corrupted it, forced him to view something impossible as probable, and as such, had caused him to deceive himself. It's never that easy, Hashirama said, trying to, at this very moment, get Madara to understand the folly of his actions. Our job is to merely do all that we can do while we're alive, and then bequeath the rest of it for future generations to accomplish. Madara gave off somewhat of an expression not too dissimilar from either surprise or realization. What he said next was sure to reveal what he was feeling.
You're so naive, just as you usually are. And you always have been the optimist. Although, perhaps, that is the proper way to be. The dream that I had has been squashed, but your dream is still relevant now, and it continues to live on.
Madara at this moment revealed how he felt. At first, his heart tried to reject Hashirama's viewpoint, just as it always had, like some knee-jerk reaction. However, as Madara laid there, the truth of Hashirama's words evident all around him, even Madara's hard heart couldn't help but acknowledge that perhaps Hashirama was right. Hashirama wasn't sure how to feel about this. A part of him felt validated, that his best friend finally acknowledged him. But at the same time, there was a subtle sorrow in realizing that it had come too late. A desire to see the world that could have been should Madara have understood from the very beginning what his role was, and how moving too quickly would ruin his chances at helping peace come along. We were both too hasty, Hashirama said, realizing that maybe he himself had moved too quickly in bringing world peace, only for it to spiral into the First Shinobi World War. We didn't need to reach our dreams ourselves. It was far more important to cultivate those who would come after, to whom we could entrust our dreams. Which means I would have failed anyway, Madara said, a hint of sorrow in his voice. Hashirama hated that this realization had to hit Madara so quickly. After all, I've always hated having someone stand behind me. Madara's words were true. Madara's biggest issue was his own pride and his own desire to validate himself. When we were just kids, you once said to me, "We're shinobi after all. We never know when we might die." And you also told me for neither side to die, both of them would have to reveal what's inside of themselves, hiding nothing at all, and to drink together as if they were brothers. That was when it came full circle for Hashirama, but the both of us are about to die. Hashirama wasn't certain he could call what he was doing living at all, so how could he die? It was then he realized how much emotion he was feeling in this moment. He must surely be alive if he was feeling like this. Therefore, when he ended the technique bonding him to his body, he could consider it death. So right now, we have a chance to drink together as old war buddies. As war buddies, Madara said, his eyes growing even more distant. His gaze now connecting with nothing, his eyes but a useless organ that did nothing but serve another, giving them a window deep into his soul. Well then, I suppose that would be okay. Bye. Madara's eyes closed and he exhaled without finishing his sentence. This left Hashirama sorrowful, wishing that they could have but a few moments more together. But it seemed as though the hands of time were stopping for nobody, and that this was the best he would get in regards to mending his relationship with his old friend. It was an incomplete thought, but the sentiments behind it had reached Hashirama. Hashirama looked down at the lifeless body of his dearest friend, knowing that the last thing on his mind was a desire to be his friend again. And to Hashirama, that was enough. Hashirama had felt that, unlike the other Edo Tensei, he had no troubles holding his spirit here, and that he could leave at any moment, but chose not to until the war had ended. But the thing was, Hashirama had seen the war's end, and yet he'd stayed around. Stayed to this moment. For this moment. Maybe there were regrets. Maybe he felt the regrets of a life where one of the people he cared about the most had rejected him, and had never forgiven him over it. Was Hashirama in the wrong? Did he actually need to be forgiven? He had merely not given Madara the Hokage ship. That was when things spiraled. Maybe though, as he sat there thinking about this, he had been right. Had he given that title to Madara in that moment, Madara would have destroyed everything they worked for in an effort to enforce his will in the wrong way. And now, as Hashirama looked up toward the heavens, he felt closure. Taking a deep breath, he felt weights lift off his shoulders. So much so that it felt as though his spiritual spine popped. Maybe it was okay to move on and see what the world would bring. As he closed his eyes, he was surrounded by light, and he felt that light drawing him up and out. This had been the second time he had been impurely incarnated into the world. The first time he'd been summoned from heaven to fight in a war against Hiruzen, and after that he was trapped within the Shinigami. However, now he was free again, and he hoped that when he returned to heaven that maybe, in the briefest of moments, Madara had repented and would find himself there too. However, as Hashirama felt himself returning to the afterlife, there was something strange. The light he saw began to fade to darkness. It grew darker before him. It was as if all light was gone. He could no longer tell where he was. All he knew was that he wasn't alone in this darkness. There was something in this room with him, something hiding in the shadows, something powerful. Hashirama, despite being one of the strongest shinobi ever to live, found that he was powerless before it, and whatever it was, it frightened him truly. His body began to burn with the darkness as it washed over him like a wave. It felt like the darkness was shredding him apart. "This is wrong," he shouted, as if whatever unknown force in the room could hear him. "What you're doing is wrong." A thought crossed into Hashirama's mind. There was no voice behind it. Instead, it was as if a realization had occurred to him in the third person. "Is this not what your brother did as well? Why did he do it? Hashirama asked himself. I don't know, he replied. No, you do know, Hashirama's own accusing voice had said inside of him. You do know, and it's for the same reason that it's happening to you, for curiosity's sake. Hashirama's own internal dialogue within himself revealed to him the answers of what was going on. As Hashirama sat there in the darkness, his own internal voice spoke once more. Just sit back and relax. This isn't going to hurt for much longer. Then you'll be happy. Hashirama's shoulders lowered and he took a deep breath. It smelled of ozone. Hashirama closed his eyes. Let's get this over with, he said. And in a moment later, he felt the most horrid thing. His body aching and shifting, contracting as he felt himself in some room where the walls were closing up around him. He screamed and wailed, tears flowing from his eyes. All sensations were cranked up to 11, and his emotional state was fraying, as if he were going crazy. And in that moment, he was in the light again. For but a moment, he opened his eyes once again, and saw a man standing over him. It was so blurry, but the longer he looked at it, the more he came to realize, was that his father? Butsuma. And a moment later, it felt as if he lost his train of thought. But in this short moment of consciousness, he realized something was different. Seeing his fingers again, how stubby, chubby, and different they were, he knew he was small. He was a baby again. But as his final memories left his mind for the time being, he questioned what a baby was, and then realized that at this point, nothing mattered. He closed his eyes once more and fell asleep for quite some time. As the years passed by, Hashirama grew older, and with his age, his mind began to redevelop. With its redevelopment, Hashirama felt the strangest feeling. He could remember doing this before, predicting what would happen next, to the point that he could tell his siblings what they'd be having for dinner before even Butsuma made that decision. As he continued to grow stronger and stronger through his training, his body also began to remember everything it had been, and what it would inevitably be again. It amazed his brethren. Each of his brothers were astounded, beginning to believe that Hashirama had far surpassed even their father. Even Butsuma began to feel this way, though he would never tell anyone. And as the war continued, Hashirama found himself neck deep in it. As the son of the clan head, it was expected that he would fight, but he found that he was more protective of his brothers than he ever had been. Hashirama's main motivation was currently to limit bloodshed. Remembering how Kawarama and Itama had died, he made it his mission to ensure that they did not perish. With each passing day, he tried to remember which battle it was that resulted in the death of Kawarama. The moment he overheard his father speak, though, about the Hagoromo clan joining the Uchiha in their fight against them, he knew what it meant. In the following battle, it would be Kawarama that would die. He recalled this because as a child, he remembered how, upon hearing about the Hagoromo clan, he hadn't really cared. After all, what difference would it make? It drove home the point to Hashirama when he lost Kawarama just how important the inclusion of the Hagoromos were to the war effort. And so, as the day came that Kawarama was supposed to go out on his own mission, separate from Hashirama, Tobirama, and Itama, Hashirama approached him. Kawarama, what's up? Kawarama asked. Hashirama wringed his hands a bit, as was a habit when he had to deal with a stressful situation. I don't think you should go on this mission, Hashirama said. What? Why? I just don't think that you should. I've got a bad feeling. Kawarama looked at Hashirama with an inquisitive stare. Is this another dinner prediction? Kawarama asked. Hashirama nodded. Kawarama sat there and thought about it. I understand that it's scary, but I can't turn this order down. Dad entrusted it to me. I just can't not do it. Hashirama nodded. I need to ask you something. What is it? Kawarama asked. Imagine for just a moment that instead of succeeding, you just die. Kawarama felt a shiver run down his spine. Let's not talk about this. Hashirama continued. If you take this mission, there's a good chance that you die without succeeding at all. I said I don't want to talk about this, Hashirama. Regardless, Hashirama continued. What if I said the intel we received was false? Then you would die for nothing. Kawarama turned around and grabbed Hashirama's collar, pulling him in, rearing back his fist as if he was going to strike him. For piss sake, you ass! I told you to shut up. What are you trying to do, freak me the hell out? Yes, Hashirama said simply. That's exactly what I'm trying to do, because I'm freaked out, Kawarama. I'm telling you now, if you go on this mission, you will die, and no mission will be accomplished. Your life will end, and it will be for nothing. Kawarama let Hashirama go. He turned away from him to continue packing, his hands noticeably shaking. I can't disobey our father, no matter how much you tell me to, do you understand? Getting his pack ready, he pushed past Hashirama with a bit of venom in his actions. Hashirama watched as his brother walked away. This would be the last time he ever saw him at this rate. As he walked outside, he saw Kawarama walking off to join his own team. A bunch of grown men. "Sir, is everything all right?" they asked him. "I'm fine, just fall in." Hashirama walked over to his brothers. "What's up with you?" Tobirama asked. "Does it have anything to do with what happened to Kawarama?" Hashirama watched as Kawarama walked away. Yeah. Kawarama was leading his men through the woods. He had pushed everything from his mind. Everything Hashirama had said, everything his own mind had told him. He pushed it all away. He couldn't focus on it right now. He needed to focus on his mission. As he sat there, it was somewhat dark. There was an orange light shining in through the trees as the sun was beginning to set. The amber hue made it look as though the distant forest was on fire, and maybe it was. Blasting powder could be smelled, like sulfur gliding across the air on a thin layer of smoke from a distant battle. The sound of explosions, the thuds and echoing out, the sound waves warping the further they traveled and ending up being ripped apart by the trees as they tried to muffle it. It was as if a distant fireworks display was celebrating some new seasonal event. But no, these were the sounds of dying, the sounds of killing, the sounds of a ghostly war that had claimed too many lives and would claim untold numbers more. Kawarama, like the rest of his brothers, hated war. He hated what it did to people, what it took from them. He hated what everyone experienced. The need to kill, the need to hurt, the need to get back at the other. He hated it. He hated partaking in it, being a driving force of it. He lamented everything that was this war, but he told himself daily what it was that he was telling himself now. "I'm helping to end the war." Kawarama was fighting this war in an effort to bring it to a close, not just for the Senju clan, but for the Uchiha as well. So no other men, women, or children would have to die for something that nobody could understand. Hashirama had explained it to him some time ago, or perhaps had brought it to his attention more like. There was no reason for the war. Kawarama, and likely many in the Senju clan, could never actually bring themselves to ask his father why it was they were fighting against the Uchiha. It was such a sensitive topic. So sensitive, in fact, that he was afraid of putting his father in a bad mood. And it was understood by many a kid that when dad was in a bad mood, things felt tense. And that tended to put everyone on edge and ruin a lot of moods. However, Hashirama was wise beyond his years, and he had told them the truth. "There is no reason to be fighting," he said. "The war has lasted for 1,000 years. What could it be about? Land? There's so much land everywhere. Unsettled land. We could go anywhere and have all the land we need. And besides, what person do you think would willingly spend life after life for 1,000 years over a piece of land anyway? No, it's something else. But what else would it be if not land? For what reason would you risk your life? A grudge? Hatred? That makes sense. If you hate someone and someone has done something to your people, you instinctively seek justice, right? But what is it that the Senju have done to the Uchiha? What is it that the Uchiha have done to the Senju? What happened 1,000 years ago that made us hate each other so bad to continually throw lives away just to get even? Must have been very important. Except it's not, because nobody knows what that thing was. The wars we fight now are against another clan because of the things they're doing now. If the Uchiha don't fight, they'll be exterminated. If the Senju don't fight, they'll be exterminated. If they do fight, then they won't ever feel justified, and thus everyone will be left unsatisfied. But let me ask, is it truly fair to take the life of someone who doesn't know or understand because they're simply connected to someone who does know and understand? The killing of children is an egregious act, one that a clan such as the Senju hates and judges when it happens to them, yet will do the same to someone else. Anger begets anger. Hatred begets hatred. When will we ever say that this is enough? The cycle must break one day, and someone will need to be the bigger man and end the conflict. Someone needs to be brave enough to swallow their pain and hatred and say, "I won't kill you." If anything, do it for your kids. Say, "I won't kill you because I don't want my family to suffer anymore." How simple is that? Will it hurt? Yes, but that pain will eventually die with the previous generation if we refuse to teach it to the next. And then, everyone can be happy. Those words were the words of Hashirama, and they were things that Kawarama often thought about when he went to sleep. As the nightmares ravaged his dreams and left him in the throes of despair, his body tired, unable to recover the lost rest, Kawarama would instead dream of a world where everything Hashirama said was true. But the sad thing was, Kawarama was not in charge. Butsuma was in charge, and he would not see reason. But that wouldn't always be the case. Eventually, that would be passed down to Hashirama, and when it was, Hashirama would steer the clan back toward peace. That was, if he could. For all Kawarama knew, Hashirama would speak of forgiveness, and instead the clan would stone him and replace him with another believer in hatred and revenge. For now, though, the mission was what needed his attention, and so he steered his men toward it. There were rumors that a supply depot was set up not far from the Uchiha's main line of defense. If Kawarama could get in there with his men and blow it up, that would result in a loss of resources, food, weapons, and other items needed to make the battle sustainable. And considering it was a joint effort between Uchiha and Hagoromo clansmen, at the best it might be enough to sever that bond. That might weaken the opposition to the point that they couldn't stand against them, and maybe might surrender, whatever brought peace more quickly. What if I said the intel we received was false? Hashirama's words echoed in Kawarama's head. Kawarama shook his head. No, it must be true. It can't be false. Hashirama's just paranoid, he told himself in an effort to relieve his stress. But all the same, the doubt was there, and Kawarama drew from that unabating fear. They crossed the empty battle lines, only bones and rusted armor lining their path. This truly felt like the Valley of Death. Dry bones lined the way, and nothing but pain and despair promised to await them. Kawarama said a silent prayer for protection as they drew closer and closer to their destination. Nothing barred the way. Nothing was stopping them from their objective. And that was peculiar. There was no way they could be so lucky, right? At any other time, Kawarama would have equated this to nothing but luck and good fortune, but now Hashirama's warning rang through his mind, and all he could do was feel as though something wasn't right. But fear of his father and the scolding he might get overpowered the fear of possible death. After all, it was only possible that they might be killed. If they weren't killed, then that meant that there was nothing for them to worry about, and there was no reason for them to confront his father. Looking at the map, they were drawing close. Kawarama found a good place for the group to rest. He then looked to two men he trusted well. You two scout ahead. Report back here in the next hour and tell us what you find. The scouts nodded and left for the treetops. Kawarama sat there, pulling his canteen from his belt. He took a couple measured sips, enough to wet his throat and coat his tongue, but not enough to impact the way he moved or his energy level. Kawarama felt as though he was going to puke. He focused on a few techniques to keep him from doing so. He had a bit of a habit of carrying certain medicinal herbs around with him that he knew were useful. Among the herbs he carried was mint. He slid a small leaf under his tongue in an effort to get it to mix with his saliva. He began to take deep, calming breaths while applying pressure to his wrists, rubbing them. He tried to focus not on the moment, but the time after this. When the mission was over, he would return home and enjoy his time with his brothers again. He could sleep in a warm bed, enjoy a hot meal. He gagged a bit within his mouth. Okay, he wasn't going to think about eating. Instead, he had begun to read this interesting book about a youth's journey into a cave, which turned into an Alice in Wonderland-esque story. He was interested in figuring out how this human planned to get home in the face of such fantastical creatures and enemies. A journey about self-discovery. He could hardly stop theorizing about how it might end. Sir?" one of the men asked. Kawarama opened his eyes and looked over. "What is it?" he asked. "The others and I have been wondering, what's weighing on your mind?" Kawarama closed his eyes again. "It's none of your business." "Well, normally I'd agree, but we're all on a team and we're trusting each other to keep the other alive. We're trusting you." Kawarama sat up. "Are you trying to say something?" The soldier looked down, away, and then back at Kawarama, displaying strength. Even though Kawarama was a kid, he wielded incredible power, physically and militarily. "You've seemed distracted since we left, and you won't tell us what's bothering you. You know you can tell us anything. We've been with you since your father first gave you command over a squad, and in all that time, we've never once questioned you. But now we just want to know, are you okay?" Kawarama couldn't keep up his rough drill sergeant persona any longer. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just stuff I was talking to my brother about." "What was it?" Kawarama took a deep sigh before explaining. "My brother seems sometimes to have precognitive powers. He sometimes refers to events that haven't yet happened, and every time he does, he's right. Earlier, he said, in this mission, I would die. I thought he was being paranoid, but he wouldn't stop. He begged me to abandon the mission, but I refused. Despite that, I can't help but wonder, was he right? What if this is a trap? What if I do die?" The shinobi put his hand on Kawarama's shoulder.
Sir, don't let it get to you. You won't die. We may not be much, but we are shinobi, and it's our sworn duty to protect you with our lives. That's what we're going to do. You will go home, they said. Kawaraama smiled. Thanks. I guess I just really needed that. We're in this together, not alone. You can share anything you need with us. After that, the scouts came back. The compound is ahead. There are some guards there, but it doesn't look like anything we can't handle. Kawaraama stood. Then let's go. Together, the small squad made their way through the fog toward the direction of the compound. As they did, it came into sight. We circle around back, Kawaraama said. Considering that the only official way in is through the gate at the front, most people will subconsciously keep their attention there. That'll give us a slightly higher chance to succeed, he said. And so, as the birds sang high up in the trees, that's what they did. Circling around back, they snuck over the wall. Getting in, they went about snuffing out any shinobi that might get in their way. Once the area was seemingly secure, they entered the tents to destroy the supplies. However, upon entering the first tent, they opened the first box to find a shinobi of the Hagoromo clan within. The other crates burst open to show shinobi in them as well. It was then that Kawaraama understood it to be what it was. A trap. His brother was right. He hadn't listened, and now he was going to die. I'm sorry, he whispered to his squad. As they tried to retreat, shinobi were on their tails. Slowly, one by one, each member of the team fell. Some elected to stay behind to give the others a chance to escape, despite Kawaraama's pleas. By the end of it, Kawaraama was the only one left. Running, he looked back but didn't see anything. But he heard them coming. Finding a hollowed-out tree, he peeled away the bark to show a cavity where he could hide. Crawling in, he pulled the bark back. His best chance was to hide. All the while, his eyes were full of tears. If he had listened to his brother, he wouldn't be in this situation. If he had just listened to Hashirama, his squad mates wouldn't be dead. In this moment, Kawaraama returned to what he truly was all along. Just a scared kid in the middle of a war who bit off more than he could chew, and now was anxiously awaiting the hand of death that was so fairly unfair to everyone, including him. Please, I don't want to die, he prayed silently. Don't let me die. Don't let them find me. Don't let them kill me, he pleaded under his breath. He remained quiet as he heard the sound of feet walking around the outside of the tree's hollow. He came in through here, I'm sure of it. I saw footprints headed in this direction, the voice of Uchiha said. Kawaraama worried that this man possessed a Sharingan. If he could detect footprints so easily, then he surely must be observant. And if he was observant, he might see the imperfections in the bark that would lead to Kawaraama's discovery. Hold on, the voice said. Everything went silent. Kawaraama's blood pressure spiked. Had he been an older man, his heart may have collapsed under the pressure, killing him. But he was not so lucky. He would face a horrible, painful death. The wood was grabbed and pulled away, opening up to show the face of an Uchiha whose eyes were not only Sharingan, but Mangekyo. Kawaraama began to piss himself at seeing those eyes. Well, what do we have here? A Senju pup. The man gained a smile on his face of true evil as his hand reached out to pull Kawaraama free. However, before he could, there was a sound. Someone was killed viciously behind him. The man turned around as if to see what was happening. It was at that time that new bark covered the hollow. Strong bark, protecting Kawaraama. The area was darkened a bit more. Kawaraama was in a state of panic when suddenly a loose vine rose from the ground below and gently wrapped itself around his hand to offer comfort. From here, he only heard the sound of fighting, screaming, dying. He heard the man cry out, "Susanoo!" and felt an explosion of brightly colored chakra. But it seemed even that was nothing compared to whoever he was fighting, because the same man cried in despair and terror before gagging on his own pain. Everything went silent. Kawaraama was still in a panicked state. It was then that fingers gripped the wood and began to pull. Kawaraama pulled a kunai in an effort to defend himself. The wood was pulled away, and Kawaraama rushed forward with his kunai to kill whoever it was on the other side, only for his kunai to be swatted away, his body gripped by a stranger. Kawaraama opened his mouth and let out a shrill scream. He heard a shush as he felt a familiar hand stroke the back of his head. His eyes opened and he saw Hashirama standing there. Tears filled his eyes as he began to cry. "You were right. You were so right. I was wrong, Hashirama. I got my squad killed because of my stubbornness. I was almost killed." Hashirama continued to stroke the back of his head. "It's okay, Kawaraama. I understand. You're okay." "How can I ever forgive myself?" he asked. "You can start by remembering that you're not all-knowing. You're human. You make mistakes." "My mistakes got them killed."
Hashirama continued to comfort his brother. They died to protect you. They loved you. They knew who you were, and I know who they were. They were glad to serve you. And so Kawarama cried for quite some time until Hashirama told him they needed to move. Soon they'd be discovered. They needed to go. Kawarama returned home and was given extended leave. Butsumo would scold Hashirama, telling him that he defied direct orders by abandoning his own mission, and should be glad that nobody died because of his actions. Hashirama apologized and would offer himself up for punishment. However, Butsumo would let it slide, telling him that because he saved Kawarama, his debt was paid, but that he should not go against orders again. To this, Hashirama said nothing. He did not agree or promise any such thing. After all, he knew what it was that he was here to do, and to follow orders that might put at risk his own personal mission was not something that Butsumo could ask of him. For quite some time, Kawarama was quiet. Itama would ask him what happened, only for Kawarama to explain to him what did indeed happen. How Hashirama had warned him, and how Kawarama had ignored the warning and almost died. How he only survived because Hashirama had come to the rescue. Itama kept that with him closely. Seeing how this affected Kawarama was enough to tell him that he wanted to follow Hashirama's advice regardless. As time passed, Kawarama would slowly return to his old self. After all, Hashirama was wiser than he had been as a child, and he too had struggled with failure to protect his friend, with the failure to do what was right. Kawarama was struggling with his failure to save his team. Hashirama had struggled with the knowledge that he'd accidentally caused the First Shinobi World War, which led to the death of millions, including himself. Hashirama would help Kawarama walk through it by reminding him that it wasn't something he did on purpose. It wasn't something he could control, and how he had tried to do what was right. How sometimes doing the right thing is hard because we don't actually know what's right and what's wrong, and that fear of messing up causes us to mess up. But even in his mistakes, he wasn't a monster. He reminded Kawarama that he was not a monster, and that because he felt bad about this proved that he was still human. He told Kawarama never to forget his teammates, but to not let his own failures drag him down, as that's not what his team would want. Instead, he told Kawarama to learn from his mistakes and live in a way that would make those who died proud. In the end, that's all he could do. Anything less would be shameful. He spoke of shame in doing anything less than fulfilling what was right for the purpose of Kawarama. He knew what guilt like this did to people, how it ended lives, sometimes by the person's own hand. He didn't want Kawarama to suffer, so he told him to keep living and do what was right by his team, else it was a worse transgression. Giving him no way but forward, Hashirama was content that Kawarama would recover, given enough time. And though these scars would last forever, he would eventually be able to move past. And just as Hashirama predicted, Kawarama recovered. But as the missions continued to grow more and more dangerous as Butsumo grew more and more ambitious, it came time for the mission in which Hashirama knew that Itama would die. As they got ready to split up, Hashirama looked to Itama. "Listen, I know what your mission is, but I'm telling you to stop. Don't leave this squad." "I don't know if I can do that. Dad won't be happy if I don't at least try to complete my mission," Itama said with a hint of trepidation in his voice. Kawarama then spoke. "Trust Hashirama when he says things like this. You'll only get yourself killed if you don't." Itama looked at Hashirama with a pale face and eyes full of terror. If I go from here, will I die?" he asked. Hashirama was silent. He didn't want to scare Itama, but all the same, he couldn't lie to him. Even in the past, Hashirama had felt something was off about Itama's mission. But by the time he had caught up to save him, his brother had already perished. He didn't want the same thing to happen again, and it was best for him to just stay in the squad, and so Itama, after hearing what his brothers had to say, did exactly that. They continued on their mission and got it completed. They would then return home where word would spread of Itama's decision, leading to him being called back by Butsumo to speak with him alone. Itama had a look of terror on his face. "Hashirama, what should I say?" Hashirama spoke with him. "Simply tell him the truth. Say that there was a risk that came up and Hashirama said it would be best not to go for the sake of your life." Itama swallowed and nodded. "Okay." Itama then began his walk towards where his father was. Every step he took, he looked as though he were a prisoner on his way to his own execution. Hashirama felt bad for him, but he knew everything would be okay. Hashirama turned back to the others. "At least he's alive," Kawarama said. "Nothing bad happened." Hashirama nodded to his brother. That's when Tobirama spoke up. "You say that as if father will ever understand." "What do you mean?" Kawarama asked. Tobirama looked to his brother. "Our father is a hard man. He's one of the driving forces behind this war and is not in any capacity seeking peace. Saving lives doesn't matter to him. I'm of the mind to think that he doesn't even mind if we're killed. What he'll see isn't his son surviving a possibly fatal trap, but instead, a coward who abandoned his mission. Whatever failure occurred today that father wouldn't want to happen will be laid at Itama's feet, and Itama is going to pay for it as a coward. Hashirama then began to realize what it was that Tobirama was saying. I need to go then, Hashirama said. I was the one who did this. I can't let Itama pay for this. Hashirama turned around and began to race off in the direction of his brother and father's meeting. The feeling of bone clashing against bone could be felt as Itama hit the ground. Metal. He tasted it, smelled it. There was a ringing in his face. The pain was horrible, but not as horrible as the emotional pain. Butsuma stood above him, his hand curled into a fist. Coward! I raised a damn coward! Dad, please stop, Itama said. Hashirama said I would die if I left. I don't care what Hashirama said. You're a Senju, and a Senju fights until his last breath. Now get up! Itama struggled to stand again as Butsuma grew closer. Please, Dad, I didn't want to die. I didn't want to get anyone killed. Aren't you glad that I lived at all? Butsuma stood there and looked at his son with disdain. You dishonored yourself by fleeing from your duty like a coward. At least if you had died, you would have died as something I could be proud of. Not now, though. Now you're going to live, sure, but dishonor will follow you, and by extension, myself, forever. Maybe it would have been better if you had died. Itama's eyes widened with shock and despair at the words of his father, tears rising up from the ducts to run down the side of his cheek. Butsuma raised his fist again to strike Itama. However, before he could, a hand gripped his wrist tightly. Butsuma turned around to see Hashirama standing there, his face grave and filled with rage. How dare you interfere, Butsuma said. Suddenly, Hashirama's fist collided with his father's nose. Butsuma hit the ground in surprise. Everything that he had said during the past, how he had struck him for daring to speak the truth about Kawarama's death, how he had scolded Itama for crying over him, how emotionless he was at Itama's death. All of it came rushing back and mixed with the current moments. How he so callously treated him despite Hashirama being right. All of that Hashirama had moved past. Coming to his father, he bid the vines of his wood release to bind Butsuma in place. Hashirama, I am your father, he shouted. Does a father curse his own children, telling them he wished they had died? He straddled Butsuma before putting another fist into his face. Hashirama pulled him up by the collar. I'm tired of your shit, Dad, he said, straining that title just enough to let Butsuma know that he was questioning if he could even call him that anymore. Your obsession with this war, your failure to ever give me reason why we fight. I bet you don't even know it yourself. This is nothing more than a grudge that you've become bitter over. You forget that in the process of trying to destroy your enemies, you set up your own family to be slaughtered just so you can hate them for doing it. You are responsible for the perpetration of this war. I've grown tired of fighting it. I don't know what your idea of a shinobi is, but it does not match mine. I don't know what your idea of a father is, but it's not mine. He punched him again. He lifted Butsuma up by his collar. Listen to me, old man, he spoke. Call yourself a leader. Call yourself a father. Call yourself a dirty bastard. I don't care. You don't ever threaten me or my brothers again, or you're dead. Got it? He pushed his father down and stood, letting the vines slack. Butsuma sat up. Hashirama! Hashirama turned around to see Butsuma holding his sword. Hashirama was silent as he looked through his brow for a moment. He then spoke. You better think very carefully about what you're doing with that. Butsuma's face was reddened. Hashirama, don't rile him up, Itama said. You shouldn't have interfered. I'd have been okay. Butsuma spoke, spit flying from his mouth. You think you're a man? You think you're able to handle the pressures of balancing a clan and a war? Then take your shot. Draw your blade. Hashirama's hand was sitting on the hilt of his katana. Is that a challenge? Hashirama asked. Butsuma nodded. It is. Duel me, right here and now, to the death. Winner leads the clan however they desire. Itama began to panic. No, he said. He stepped between them. You two stop. We're all family here. You can't do this, he said. You can't kill each other. Itama turned to Hashirama. Hashirama, apologize to our father right now, he demanded. He then turned to Butsuma. Please, father, he doesn't mean it. Let it slide, I beg you. Butsuma looked down at Itama. Shut up, coward, he said, backhanding him to the ground. Butsuma looked at Hashirama. Duel me here and now, Hashirama. Accept my challenge and prepare for battle. Refuse, and you'll be exiled.
If you hate the war so badly, then leave and never fight again.
Hashirama stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. He wished he could say he was surprised, but Butsuма was a prideful man who had set the war and his own name even over the lives of his children, so he couldn't. Hashirama had only one thing he could do now. "You're being a fool," he said to his father. His father spat on the ground.
"The only fool here is the one who believes they're stronger than the man vastly superior than them."
"So, still you, huh?" Hashirama said, drawing a sneer from Butsuma. Hashirama unsheathed his katana. It was at about this time that Tobirama and Kawarama ran to the scene. Itama ran to them. "Please, you have to stop them. Papa and Hashirama are going to kill each other." Tobirama stepped forward, ready to do something, but Butsuma pointed his katana at him.
"Stay back," he shouted. "Do not interfere."
"Father, you can't seriously mean to kill your own son," Tobirama said. Butsuma scoffed.
"Hashirama, you mean? I renounce him as my son. He is no longer my son. I disown him, and I claim back the name of Senju. He has no claim to it, not unless he takes it back."
Hashirama spoke. "If that's what you will make me do." Tobirama walked back to the others in the group. "Aren't you going to do anything?" Itama asked. Tobirama shook his head. "There's nothing we can do. They're both stubborn oxes. Hashirama gets it, honestly." In a moment more, they readied to fight. It was obvious in both of their eyes that it was about to end. For better or worse, someone would die on this day. Tobirama shook his head at the disgrace. Something he spoke out. "It's disgraceful, you know," he shouted at them. "A father and son attempting to kill each other. It's sinfully evil." Both of them looked to Tobirama with a silent command to be quiet. Tobirama may have started sweating, but he merely crossed his arms in silent judgment. Finally, they rushed toward each other. As the orange setting sun cast the burning embers of twilight upon them, their blades clashed with strength and power, sparks flying. Butsuma's form was primal, strong, and evenly balanced between defense and offense. It was impeccable. Hashirama's form, however, was more refined, less anger-driven, measured. It was also well-balanced, but due to its lack of emotion or haste, Tobirama felt it had the advantage. Neither were using ninjutsu. This was purely a duel of kenjutsu. Both would live and die by the sword in this moment. As their blades clashed, it was so fast that even Tobirama was impressed. He could hardly see it anymore. Butsuma was a beast on the battlefield, and as such, he had earned a reputation for his ability, becoming known as the Sabertooth of the Senju. But Hashirama being able to keep up accordingly was a testament to his power. They had no idea how strong Hashirama really had been. And as the blades continued to clash, the truth became clear. Hashirama was winning. The battle lasted a little longer, but with a slick move and a flick of the wrist, Hashirama sent Butsuma's blade flying in another direction. Butsuma, having found himself defeated by his own child, fell to his knees. Hashirama stood over him, his blade pointing towards his father's throat. Butsuma looked up at his son with a steely determination.
"Do it, Hashirama. Kill me."
Hashirama stood there for a moment before placing his blade back in its saya. "We're done." He turned around and began to walk away. Butsuma sat there for a moment in shock.
"You can't do this to me," he shouted. "That's not how I raised you. You're stealing my honor."
"What you raised me to become and who I am are two totally different things. Say what you want about my anger and my mouth, but I'm not a father killer. I will not take the life of the man who gave me mine." Butsuma grit his teeth before reaching into his pouch to pull a kunai. Hashirama heard Itama cry out. He turned back to see that Butsuma had tried to commit harakiri in some effort to regain his honor, only for Itama to barely make it in time to hold his father's hand back. "Dad, no!" he shouted. Tobirama stood there still, his arms crossed. Kawarama was halfway between Tobirama and Butsuma.
"Stop, Itama," Butsuma said. "Let me die in honor."
"Stop, Dad, please!" Butsuma sighed.
"Itama, maybe you don't care about honor or pride, but some of us do. Let me go."
Itama had tears rolling down his cheeks. "Please, Dad, don't do it. I can't lose you. I'm not strong. I'm a coward, I know that, but I beg you. I don't want this family to fall apart."
"It's already shot to hell, son. You can't fix it," Butsuma said.
"No, Dad, we can. Please." Itama pulled so hard that he ripped the kunai from Butsuma's hand. He rolled back. Butsuma shook his head and pulled another kunai. He was ready to end it when he looked up and saw Itama holding the kunai out over his own stomach.
"What are you doing?" Butsuma asked.
Itama was crying tears of sorrow and fear. If you're gonna kill yourself, then I'm gonna do it too. Butsuma was shocked by this. Tobirama shook his head. You're all idiots, he said, drawing everyone's attention. Nobody's taking a moment to understand anyone here. This is half the reason we're still at war with the Uchiha. He looked at Butsuma and then to Hashirama before continuing. Father, you once told me that the greatest love a parent can show is to turn their children into true shinobi, didn't you? Butsuma couldn't deny this. Tobirama then spoke. Look at Hashirama. He just bested you in a duel. Not even Taijima Uchiha could do that. You've birthed a legend. And look at Itama too. Despite his fear of death, he's willing to commit harakiri just to keep his family together, proving that he places you both above his own life. I've never seen honor so strong. He then looked to Hashirama. And as for you, you once told me that the issue with the Senju and Uchiha is that they can't swallow their anger, that they continue to fight forever and ever because they seek retribution. But didn't you just seek retribution against our father because of something he did to Itama? It was for justice, Hashirama said. What do you call justice? You pinned our father down and returned everything to him tenfold before pushing him to a state of suicide. If you're both what you claim to be, then you should know right now that this was a mistake. He looked to Butsuma. You shouldn't have struck Itama and said those things. They're clearly false, cruel, and abusive. He then looked at Hashirama. You let your anger get to you and become the very thing you wish to destroy. He then pointed to himself and Kawarama. And now what about us? Our father is going to leave his own sons orphaned? Our brother's going to enter self-exile and give up on his dreams, let us all die without his foreknowledge? You're all acting very much not like yourselves. Tobirama shook his head. Even I feel like I'm not acting like myself. But you know what? Screw it. I'm pissed off and you're both gonna know it. You both need to move past your momentary desires and look at this logically. Are you really willing to throw everything away just because of this one moment? Butsuma looked down. He dropped his kunai. Itama, in relief, did the same. Butsuma, tears rolling down his cheeks, wrapped his arms around his son. I'm sorry, Itama. I didn't mean what I said. I don't care why you didn't keep your orders. I don't want you to die. I was so wrong to treat you that way. Itama hugged his father and cried, barely able to formulate any words. The closest he could come to was, "It's okay." Hashirama took a deep breath. He had acted out of character over this, just as Tobirama had said. But in that moment, hearing his father curse his brother to death, he couldn't help but remember what he had felt when Itama had once perished because of his father's orders. Perhaps the future and past had melted together with Hashirama and caused him to view what his father said as disrespect toward the Itama who had died. All the same, Hashirama wasn't sure yet if he could return to the fold. His father had taken away his surname. Hashirama Senju was just Hashirama now. That was until Tobirama approached him and spoke with him. Nobody can take away who you are, Hashirama. Not even our father. He was upset. You're going to be fine. Now come back to us. Hashirama let out a sigh and nodded. Okay. After this, Hashirama finally explained what had happened to him, about the life he lived, and the way the world had changed. At first, Butsuma did not understand, but Itama, Kawarama, and Tobirama all understood it. It explained so much. And as Butsuma began to understand what his sons were saying, he realized that Hashirama had been right all along, and that he had witnessed the future firsthand and was trying to reshape it into the proper future. It was then that Butsuma knew that he had to let Hashirama take the wheel. While he would need to remain clan head for a time for this to work, he'd make decisions based on Hashirama's best wishes. And what Hashirama knew was that he needed to befriend Madara Uchiha. To that end, Hashirama would set off on a special mission with the intent to save the children of Taijima. Not only had Hashirama managed to save his own family, but he too would set about saving Madara's. Remembering when Madara said his brothers had died, they would set out on those days and specifically spare the children of Taijima, returning them to their homes safely as an olive branch. Hashirama would further come to meet Madara by the river, where he'd proceed to befriend him. The two spent time together and enjoyed it. Of course, the war dragged on, so they couldn't exactly tell their full names to one another, but they expressed their wishes for the future. However, unsure of if the future would even exist for them, Madara spoke. We are shinobi after all. We never know when we might die. But if I'm lucky to see the future, I hope to see the Senju and Uchiha sit together at the table and drink as friends. But to do that, they need to be willing to open up, to explain what's in their very hearts without hiding anything.
Only when we share our pain can we overcome it. But if they can learn to overcome it, then maybe there will be no more need for people to die in this war, and we may have peace. Hashirama nodded. That is a goal well within our reach. We just need to see both sides convince each other to pursue it. Madara looked up into the sky. Then maybe we'll never have to see war again. I would love to be able to say that war is behind us forever, to know that I was one of the people who helped end it for good. This was where the crux of Madara's problem began. Perhaps that's where Hashirama's did too. They believed that by ending the war between the two clans, that war might go away for good, but they were too naive. I would love that too, Hashirama said, but it might not be feasible. Madara looked over at Hashirama questioningly. Hashirama continued, "You see, war is not something that only exists between the Senju and the Uchiha. War is something independent that exists as a consequence to the weaknesses in all men. We could end war between our two peoples, but war will continue to exist in the world." "You don't think we can end all wars?" Madara asked with a hint of prideful judgment in his voice, as if judging Hashirama for not having enough faith. Hashirama spoke. "I think there are many ways to end all wars. One might end wars by trying to steal away free will through threat. Others might try to end all wars through genocide. Another may try to end wars through separating every individual into a separate world that only they may rule. There are so many ways to end wars, but not every single one of them is good, and many of which will have unintended side effects that will rob us if we move too quickly. No, peace needs to be cultivated slowly, like a farmer planting crops. After all, we're only human. We're not God. We don't have the power to execute our will perfectly. However, we can slowly think it out and teach it. That's why I wish to form a village that's strong, but also wise, kind, and loving. We won't end war all in one lifetime. We can't, and we don't need to. We just need to pass it on to the next generation. I find it hard to trust the next generation. They don't inspire confidence in me," Madara said. Hashirama nodded. "I can understand the sentiment, but that's why we must raise them up properly. A proper structure and proper ideals. If we teach them to avoid our mistakes, they can forge ahead into the future. We don't need to accomplish this alone, just set the groundwork that they will rocket off of. Then when they are old, they too can guide the next generation. Maybe not in this generation, or the next, or even the one after that, but one day, one of the generations that come from us will see the world in perpetual peace. We just have to teach them." Madara thought about these things. "Slow and steady, huh?" Hashirama nodded. "How can we ever ask anyone else to believe in bonds if we ourselves are afraid to?" Madara understood what Hashirama was saying. Maybe he too needed to let go of his aversion of getting help from anyone else, and instead invest in trusting others to help finish what he started. No relay race can be won by a single person. The power of many overcomes the power of one. Madara knew this to be true, and in the end he submitted to Hashirama's way of viewing things. "You're ever the optimist, Hashirama, but maybe that's the proper way to be. I also wish to be an optimist. Maybe someday, when I'm clan head, I'll sue for peace." It was then that Madara's eyes widened as he realized he'd accidentally doxed himself. He looked to Hashirama, who smiled. "When I too become a clan head, I'll sue for peace with you too." It was then that it became clear. "You're Butsuma Senju's kid?" Madara asked. Hashirama nodded. "And you're Taijima's." Madara began to freak out. It was then that Hashirama took his hand to calm him. "Madara, look at me. You heard what I said. I want peace with you, with your clan. We've been at war too long, and I don't know why, but I know your clan has been hurt by mine, and my clan has been hurt too. But all we have to do is open our hearts. It's time to put your actions where your words have gone. I'm opening my heart to you and letting you know everything. Now show me you aren't going to stop at only words." Madara felt like he was on the verge of a panic attack, but he then remembered his brothers speaking of how some Senju clansmen spared their lives and sent them home with provisions even. The Senju clan was attempting to change for the better, and maybe it was time for the Uchiha clan to do so as well. And as time passed, Taijima and Butsuma would pass down their clan head titles to their sons, Madara and Hashirama. And as soon as this occurred, the two began opening up for peace. Madara advocated for it with his clan, and Hashirama advocated the same to the Senju. And as the two clans began to understand what this meant, they became more open toward it. The idea of building a village together where none would ever die again.
where the Senju and Uchiha would basically be the same clan. It was an exciting proposition to which the Senju and Uchiha both agreed. And so, with Madara choosing to join Hashirama permanently, he would not find his faith shaken. Especially when Hashirama, also putting his money where his mouth was, decided to have faith that Madara would do what was right. As such, when the time to become Hokage came around, he offered it to Madara. Tobirama would naturally try to step in to stop this, but Hashirama would explain to him why this was important, and not to interfere. Madara would name Hashirama as his confidant, and the two would proceed to rule the village together. Would war break out? Yes. It was a symptom of the ever-changing world, and the new future the two were trying to sow together. Nonetheless, Hashirama helped Madara keep his head and would continue to foster trust in the future by reminding Madara that this was nothing more than growing pains. Madara continued to trust in Hashirama's dream, and eventually they would pass the torch along to the next generation. As Hashirama lay on his deathbed, a happy man, glad that his friendship with the now late Madara Uchiha had survived, he made one small request to Tobirama. "Please, brother, destroy any information or reference to your Edo Tensei technique. Please." I hope you all enjoyed the video. Be sure to leave a comment down below telling us what you thought and any other ideas for videos like this that you want to see us do. I really like doing these what if they were reborn with all their memories type videos. It allows me to see what could happen if our characters were allowed to metagame a little bit. I certainly enjoyed making this video, and if you enjoyed watching it, be sure to let YouTube know by clicking that like button. And if you've not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? If you subscribe, not only will you be helping us out here at the Amagi make more content like this, it also gives you access to the notification bell that will inform you when we drop more videos. Not to mention, it's free. You don't have to pay to subscribe and it helps us out. Sounds like a win-win to me. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, here's some other videos I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy. Be sure to give them a shot. Anyway, until next time, peace out.